Okay, so today we're really diving into the drug crisis in the U.S. It's a heavy topic.
It really is. And our goal here is to try and get a clearer picture of, the scope and the real human impact.
Exactly. We're looking particularly at places like Kensington in Philadelphia and the Tenderloin District in San Francisco.
Right, we've got quite a few firsthand accounts reports from people on the ground.
Yeah, and they paint a pretty stark picture. We want to kind of unpack the drugs involved, the human cost.
And the incredible challenges for individuals, for whole communities. It's complex.
Let's start with just how big this problem is. The scale seems overwhelming.
It is. I mean, the statistics alone are pretty grim. Fentanyl is just everywhere, driving this epidemic.
Just someone dying every few minutes from an overdose in the U.S. That figure is hard to even grasp.
It really is. And look at Philadelphia. In 2022, they were seeing something like 4 overdose deaths every single day.
4 a day. And nationally.
Nationally, the year before that, fentanyl was linked to 75,000 deaths. That's around 200 people dying every day.
200. It's staggering. And San Francisco, too, is described as just being brought to its knees by opioids.
Yeah, very high overdose rates there as well. It's clearly not just one or two cities. It's a nationwide issue.
And it's evolving, right? It's not just fentanyl anymore. There's this other layer emerging.
That's right. This is maybe one of the most alarming parts, these new drug combinations.
Like xylazine.
Exactly. Xylazine, which is, it's actually a horse tranquilizer. It's not for humans at all.
And dealers are mixing that with fentanyl. Why?
Well, on the street, they call it tranq, or the zombie drug. It seems the idea is to make the fentanyl high last longer.
But the reports say this mix is even more lethal.
Apparently, yes, even deadlier. And Kensington, Philadelphia is singled out as like a major hub for this stuff.
A huge open-air market for both fentanyl and tranq.
Right. And the impact on that neighborhood is just devastating. You read about the squalor, the needles everywhere.
People just incapacitated on the sidewalks. It sounds like a war zone.
It really does. And that brings us to the human side, the individual stories.
Yeah, let's talk about Kensington some more. We heard about Roz, who runs the Sunshine House.
Yes, a small place offering some refuge. But the numbers. She sees between 100 and 250 people a day.
Wow. That just shows the sheer need right there.
It really does. And then there's Kirsten's story. She'd been going to Kensington for, 4 years?
Yeah, 4 years buying drugs. Mostly fentanyl mixed with tranq, she said.
And her reason. She talked about losing her children and how that loss just fueled the addiction. It's heartbreaking.
Terribly so. And later, the report describes seeing her in a really bad state, just highlighting how destructive these drugs are.
Yeah, it's visceral. These aren't just statistics. These are people's lives being destroyed.
We also heard from Jennifer, right? A
Right.
former nurse in Kensington,
Yes, another tough story. She got addicted after work injuries, started on painkillers.
which seems like such a common pathway, unfortunately.
It does, and for her, it progressed to fentanyl and then eventually to tranq as well.
And she mentioned needing to use every couple of hours.
Every 2 hours. It just shows the incredible, the intense grip of this kind of addiction.
What stood out to me was the description of her preparing to inject using alcohol pads, a tourniquet.
Right. It's this strange, almost jarring detail. Amidst all the chaos of addiction, this routine, this attempt at, carefulness.
It really underlines how insidious it is.
Definitely. Now, if we zoom out a bit, this isn't just happening in cities like Philly. The supply chain is a huge part of it.
You mean the border? The efforts to stop the drugs coming in.
Exactly. Down in Arizona, along the U.S.-Mexico border, law enforcement is seizing huge amounts of fentanyl.
The numbers are pretty wild, aren't they? From 50,000 pills seized in 2017.
To 116 million pills seized just last year. The increase is astronomical.
How are smugglers getting it across?
All sorts of ways, hiding it in furniture, using camouflage. They're very resourceful.
And the border is just so vast, it must be incredibly difficult to stop it all.
Extremely challenging. You have the sheer size of the border, plus the adaptability of the cartels. It feels like an endless battle.
And all that fentanyl flowing in just fuels what we see happening in Kensington and in San Francisco, too.
Precisely. Let's talk about San Francisco's Tenderloin District. The situation there is described as just as critical.
Yeah, we heard from Angelina, who's unhoused there.
Yeah.
She was quite open about using marijuana, crack, and fentanyl.
Right. And the area itself is described almost as a place where, drug use is somewhat tolerated, maybe as part of a certain policy approach.
That's the impression given. Then there's Angie. She's been using for 5 years.
Yes, mainly fentanyl and crack cocaine. And she mentioned spending about $20 to $30 a day on fentanyl.
Which highlights another major factor. It's cheap.
Incredibly cheap. That low cost makes it so accessible, so prevalent.
And her story. She said her addiction started after her child's father got into heroin.
Yeah, it underscores that sort of ripple effect, how addiction can spread through relationships, almost like a disease. It's not just about one person's choice.
It's a whole web of factors. So, with all this, are there efforts to fight back? What's being done on the ground?
There are efforts, definitely, but they often seem overwhelmed. Back in Kensington, Roz at the Sunshine House is doing vital work.
Giving out Narcan, naloxone.
Yes, reversing opioid overdoses. But she's also doing tourniquet training?
Tourniquet training for overdoses.
No, for stab and gunshot wounds. It just shows the level of violence associated with the drug scene there.
God, that's grim. Addressing overdoses and violence.
Yeah. And then in San Francisco, the city is distributing pipes for smoking fentanyl. That's part of their harm reduction strategy.
Harm reduction. Trying to make drug use safer if people aren't stopping.
Essentially, yes. Providing clean pipes, the idea is to reduce risks like infections from injecting, but it's controversial.
I can imagine. Critics probably say it enables use or it doesn't solve the root problem.
Exactly. They argue it doesn't tackle the addiction itself and maybe doesn't even prevent overdoses effectively long term. It's a complex debate.
Amidst all this darkness, though, there are these moments, these individuals trying to make a difference.
Absolutely. You see glimmers of hope. Like Josh in Kensington, just offering free haircuts, a small act of dignity.
Yeah, that's powerful in its own way. And JJ in San Francisco.
Right, he's actively documenting what's happening, using social media, trying to raise awareness.
And connecting people with help, like detox centers.
Yes, trying to bridge that gap. There's a moment where he's trying to persuade Angie, the woman we mentioned, to consider getting treatment.
That must be incredibly difficult outreach work.
No doubt. And you have figures like Del Seymour in the Tenderloin. He's well-respected, a former addict himself.
What's his focus?
He's really pushing for immediate medical care, more accessible treatment centers right there. These people are really fighting the good fight.
But the challenges they're up against are just immense.
Yeah.
Especially with tranq.
That's a huge one. Naloxone, Narcan, it works on opioids like fentanyl, but it does nothing for xylazine, the tranq part.
So if someone overdoses on the mix,
The Narcan might help with the fentanyl, but not the xylazine effects. And worse, there aren't really any set protocols for tranq withdrawal.
making it even harder for people to quit.
Much harder. Plus, tranq causes these horrific skin wounds, deep ulcers that don't heal, sometimes leading to amputation. It adds another layer of physical suffering.
Just awful. And what about support systems? In San Francisco, they mentioned social services renting hotel rooms.
They do for unhoused drug users, but apparently the conditions in some of these places aren't great.
So bad that some people feel safer back on the streets.
That's what some individuals reported, yeah. It highlights the gap between intention and effective support. And then
Yeah.
you have the whole political dimension, different ideas on how to even approach the crisis.
Yeah, the policy debates seem never-ending.
It all adds to the complexity. There's an urgent need for better medical understanding, especially of tranq, and more robust, accessible support systems. The dominance of fentanyl, now made even worse by things like xylazine. It paints a really bleak picture across the country.
And the stories, Kirsten, Jennifer, they just drive home the terrible cost of addiction and how incredibly hard recovery is.
It feels almost insurmountable sometimes when you hear these accounts.
But then you see the people like Roz, Josh, JJ, Del Seymour. These individuals on the ground providing aid, offering dignity, pushing for change.
They offer vital glimmers of hope, true acts of compassion in desperate situations.
They really do. But their efforts, while so important, also kind of highlight the scale, don't they? It feels like we need something much bigger.
That seems to be the underlying message, that individual efforts, while crucial, aren't enough on their own. Systemic change is needed.
So as we wrap up, maybe the thought to leave you, the listener, with is this.
Yeah.
You see the resilience, the fight in people like Roz and JJ, but what larger shifts in policy and healthcare and how we support communities? What fundamental changes do we really need to make as a society to truly combat a crisis this massive and offer real sustainable ways for people to find recovery?